Your soulmate is married, but their heart is still looking for you. Stay with me. Please don't rush this. What you're about to hear isn't meant to shock you or pull you into fantasy. It's meant to tell a truth that most people feel but rarely have the courage to name. This is not about breaking vows, crossing lines, or romantic drama. This is about the quiet reality of the human heart, the part that doesn't always align neatly with the life someone has built. If you felt a strange heaviness lately, a pull you can't explain, or a connection that refuses to fade no matter how much logic you apply to it, there is a reason. And no, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're sensing something real that exists beneath appearances. Your soulmate is married. That fact alone feels final, heavy, and confusing. When you first realized it, you may have felt a sharp mix of disbelief and self-doubt. A part of you probably said, "This is where it ends." Another part quietly wondered why it didn't feel over at all. That inner conflict didn't come from imagination. It came from awareness. Because marriage does not automatically complete the heart. It completes a structure. A commitment. A responsibility. But the heart is more complex than legality or timing. The heart responds to resonance, not labels. And right now, your soulmate's heart is restless. Not because they want to escape their life. Not because they are chasing something forbidden. But because something inside them recognizes you in a way they didn't expect, and didn't plan for. This recognition didn't arrive dramatically. It arrived subtly. Through conversation that felt easy. Through silence that felt safe. Through moments where they felt more seen, more understood, more themselves than they had in a long time. They didn't go looking for that. It found them. And when it did, it unsettled them. At first, they tried to dismiss it. They told themselves it was curiosity. Or admiration. Or a fleeting emotional spark. They reminded themselves of their commitments, their life, their responsibilities. They did what most people do when something inconvenient feels real, they try to rationalize it away. But recognition doesn't disappear just because it's inconvenient. It stays. Your soulmate doesn't sit around thinking about you all day. That's not how this works. Instead, you appear in moments when their guard is down. Late at night. During quiet drives. In conversations that feel hollow compared to the depth they once felt with you. You surface not as temptation, but as contrast. Contrast between how they live and how they feel. This is where things get complicated, not externally, but internally. They are not unhappy in a dramatic sense. They may even love the person they married. They may be committed, loyal, and present in many ways. But love does not cancel awareness. Commitment does not erase longing for depth. And responsibility does not silence the part of the heart that recognizes alignment. What they feel for you is not a plan. It's a realization. A realization that some connections awaken parts of us that routine, safety, and predictability cannot. You didn't come into their life to replace anyone. You came into their life to reveal something. Something they didn't know was missing until it stirred awake. And that is why their heart is still looking for you. Not physically. Not recklessly. But emotionally. They look for you in conversations that almost go there but don't. They look for you in moments when they wish they could speak freely. They look for you in the quiet understanding they rarely experience elsewhere. This searching is subtle, even to them. It shows up as restlessness they can't name, as dissatisfaction that doesn't make sense on paper, as a feeling that something important was left unfinished. And unfinished truth weighs heavily. Here's the part that matters most for you to hear: their heart looking for you does not mean they are coming to you. It does not mean they will leave their marriage. It does not mean there is a future promised or owed. It means the connection touched something real. And real things don't disappear just because they're complicated. Your soulmate is living with an internal divide. On one side is the life they chose, the commitments they honor, the structure they live within, the version of themselves that functions responsibly. On the other side is the part of them that woke up around you, the part that felt alive, honest, unguarded. They don't talk about this conflict. They don't dramatize it. They manage it quietly. They choose restraint daily. And restraint is exhausting. People assume that wanting someone else means disloyalty. That's not always true. Sometimes what someone wants is not another person, but the version of themselves that only existed in a certain connection. And you were the mirror for that version. That's why your presence lingered. That's why the connection didn't feel casual. That's why distance didn't resolve it. They didn't expect you to matter this much. And now that you do, they're left navigating a reality where the heart and the structure of life are slightly out of sync. You may have felt this imbalance energetically. A sense that they were present but holding back. That something wanted to be said but never was. That their eyes held more truth than their words allowed. Those moments were not accidental. They were restraint in motion. Your soulmate's heart is still looking for you because you represent honesty without performance. Depth without chaos. Understanding without demand. And once someone experiences that, it becomes a reference point. They don't forget it. They compare everything else to it, often unconsciously. But here is the grounding truth you must hold with both compassion and strength: you are not meant to live inside someone else's unresolved conflict. You were not meant to be a silent ache. You were not meant to be a secret comparison. You were not meant to be the emotional space someone visits but never chooses. The fact that their heart still looks for you says something about the connection, but it also says something about their limits. Limits matter. Because love that cannot be lived openly becomes heavy. Connection without choice becomes a burden. Resonance without alignment becomes pain. And your soul is not meant to carry that. This part of the story is not about waiting for them to realize something. It's about you realizing something. Realizing that what you felt was not wrong, exaggerated, or imagined, but also realizing that feeling alone does not create a future. You can honor the truth of the connection without sacrificing your own clarity. You can acknowledge that their heart recognizes you without positioning yourself as an option or escape. You can step back without invalidating what was real. That is maturity. And right now, this message isn't asking you to act. It's asking you to understand. Understand that some people meet their soulmate after their life is already structured. Understand that recognition does not always arrive on time. Understand that sometimes, the purpose of a connection is not union, it's awakening. You awakened something in them. They awakened something in you. And what happens next is not about fantasy or fate forcing outcomes. It's about choice, alignment, and self-respect. This is only the beginning of this story. In the next part, you'll understand why their heart keeps searching even though their life is settled, what they are truly missing, and why this situation was never meant to trap you, but to strengthen you. For now, sit with this truth gently. Not every soulmate is meant to stay. Some are meant to wake you up. Stay with me. Don't rush this part. This is not something to skim or half listen to. This part asks you to slow your breathing, to soften your chest, and to let the truth land without fear or fantasy. Because what we're talking about now isn't surface-level emotion. It's the deeper reason your soulmate's heart keeps searching for you even though their life looks settled. This is the part people rarely talk about, because it's uncomfortable. It doesn't fit neatly into right or wrong, good or bad, loyal or disloyal. It lives in the gray space of human truth, where someone can be committed and still incomplete, loving and still unsettled, faithful and still quietly searching. Your soulmate did not marry by accident. They chose their partner for real reasons. Stability, history, safety, timing, shared goals. A sense of "this makes sense." Their marriage was built on logic, responsibility, and a version of love that felt dependable at the time. And that matters. This isn't about dismissing their marriage or pretending it isn't real. It is real. But what they didn't know, what almost no one knows until it happens, is that love built on stability does not always touch the deepest layers of the soul. It doesn't always awaken the parts of you that have been sleeping. Sometimes it maintains you instead of transforming you. And then you came into their life. Not to replace anyone. Not to tempt them. Not to break anything. You arrived as a contrast. With you, they didn't have to perform a role. They didn't have to manage perception. They didn't have to stay on script. Something about your presence invited honesty without effort. Depth without interrogation. Stillness without boredom. That's what their heart is looking for. Not you as a person alone, but the state of being you activated in them. When they're with you, or when they think of you, they remember what it feels like to be emotionally awake. To be seen without explanation. To speak without editing every sentence. To feel resonance instead of routine. That experience doesn't disappear once it's felt. It becomes a reference point. And now, without even trying to, they compare. Not consciously, not cruelly, not with judgment, but internally. They notice when conversations feel shallow. They notice when they're misunderstood but don't correct it because it feels pointless. They notice when they feel lonely even while sitting next to someone they love. That loneliness confuses them. Because on paper, they should feel fulfilled. They did everything right. They followed the rules. They made the responsible choice. So why does something still feel unfinished? This is where the heart starts searching. Not outwardly. Not through actions. But inwardly. Through memory. Through longing. Through quiet moments when truth slips past defense. And in those moments, your presence surfaces, not as desire, but as recognition. They don't necessarily want to leave their marriage. What they want is to feel alive in it. And that's the most painful part. Because once someone realizes the difference between safety and aliveness, they can't unlearn it. They can't go back to believing that comfort alone is enough. They can't unknow what depth feels like. That doesn't mean they stop loving their spouse. It means they start questioning themselves. They ask things like, why do I feel more understood by someone who isn't my partner? Why do I feel more honest in silence with them than in conversation at home? Why does my chest feel tight when I think about never speaking this truth? These questions don't make them bad. They make them human. Your soulmate is living with a quiet grief for a version of themselves they didn't know existed until you reflected it back to them. Grief for emotional depth that arrived after commitments were already made. Grief for timing that doesn't align with truth. And grief looks like searching. They search for you not because they want to act on it, but because their nervous system remembers how regulated it felt around you. How calm. How grounded. How honest. When life feels overwhelming or emotionally flat, their heart reaches for that memory automatically. That's why you may feel them energetically at odd times. Late at night. During transitions. When something meaningful happens. That's not them trying to pull you in. That's their heart trying to remember itself. Here's something crucial you need to understand, though, something that will protect you if you let it. Their searching is about them, not about you. It's about what they are missing internally. It's about parts of themselves that didn't fully integrate into the life they chose. It's about emotional honesty they postponed for practicality. And unless they are willing to do the internal work to bring that depth into their marriage or their life honestly, the searching won't stop. Even if you disappear completely. That's the part people don't realize. You are not the cause of their restlessness. You are the mirror that revealed it. This is why the situation can feel so heavy on your side if you're not careful. Because when someone's heart keeps reaching for you emotionally while their life stays elsewhere, it creates an imbalance. You can start feeling like a ghost in someone else's story. Like the unspoken truth that never gets chosen. Like the emotional home someone visits but never lives in. And that is not a role your soul was meant to play. You were not meant to be the quiet longing. You were not meant to be the secret comparison. You were not meant to be the place someone escapes to emotionally. Understanding this doesn't make the connection meaningless. It makes it clear. Clear that the purpose of this bond was awakening, not attachment. Clarity, not possession. Growth, not sacrifice. Your soulmate's heart is still looking for you because it's looking for honesty, depth, and emotional presence, and right now, it associates those qualities with you. But that does not mean you are meant to supply them. In fact, staying available emotionally would only delay their reckoning with themselves. And it would delay your own forward movement too. This is the part where compassion must walk hand in hand with boundaries. You can have compassion for their confusion without carrying it. You can honor the connection without living inside it. You can acknowledge the truth without waiting for it to turn into action. That is emotional maturity. What you're being asked to do now is not to hope harder, love quieter, or wait longer. You're being asked to understand the role you played, and then step out of it with dignity. Because once you see clearly that their heart is searching for a state of being, not a secret future, you stop personalizing their inability to choose. And when you stop personalizing it, you get your power back. In the next part, we'll talk about what happens if they never stop searching, what that means for you, and how this connection actually prepares you for the kind of love that doesn't arrive conflicted, hidden, or divided. For now, let this truth settle gently. You didn't arrive to take something away from their life. You arrived to show them something about themselves. And your life does not need to pause while they figure out what to do with that truth. Stay with me. I know this is long. I know part of you wonders why it needs to be this deep. But this part cannot be shortened, because this is where the truth stops being romantic and starts being liberating. This is the part where the story stops centering on what they feel and finally centers on what this connection is actually doing to your life. Your soulmate is married. Their heart is still looking for you. And now comes the hardest truth of all, that searching may never stop. Even if nothing ever happens. Most people believe searching ends when a choice is made. But that's only true when the choice is aligned with the soul. When someone chooses from fear, obligation, timing, or safety, the choice may stabilize their life, but it does not quiet their inner world. Your soulmate chose a life that made sense. What they didn't choose was full emotional truth. And once emotional truth is awakened, it does not go back to sleep. This is where the situation becomes dangerous for you if you don't understand it clearly. Because when someone's heart keeps searching while their life stays committed elsewhere, they often unconsciously turn another person into an emotional anchor. A place where they feel understood. A mirror where they feel alive. A reminder of who they could have been if they had chosen differently. And that person becomes you. Not intentionally. Not manipulatively. But gradually. They don't call you asking for more. They don't cross obvious lines. They don't say, "Wait for me." But energetically, emotionally, subtly, they keep you present in their inner world. And here is the quiet danger: you can begin to live inside someone else's unresolved life without realizing it. You start measuring time by whether they think of you. You start sensing their moods. You start interpreting signs, pauses, energy shifts. You tell yourself you're not waiting. But part of you is paused. Paused between compassion and self-betrayal. This is not because you are weak. It's because the connection is real. But real connections can still be misaligned. And misalignment, when prolonged, drains the soul. Your soulmate searching is not malicious. It's not selfish in a conscious way. It's human. They are searching for the version of themselves they felt around you, the version that felt honest, present, awake. But here's the truth that changes everything. They are not searching for you. They are searching for themselves. And unless they are willing to dismantle the life that keeps them divided, not just emotionally but structurally, the search will continue no matter who stands in front of them. Even if you disappear. That's the part people don't talk about. You could walk away completely. You could go silent forever. You could build an entirely new life. And they would still feel the ache. Because the ache is internal. Which means staying connected does not solve it. Waiting does not solve it. Loving quietly does not solve it. It only postpones your freedom. This is where you need to understand your role with brutal honesty and deep compassion for yourself. You were not meant to be the place they emotionally visit while staying physically and structurally committed elsewhere. You were not meant to be the unspoken truth that never gets chosen. You were not meant to live as a possibility instead of a priority. And here is the part that may hurt, but will also free you. If they were ready to live in alignment with what they feel, they would already be making different choices. Not dramatic ones. Not reckless ones. But honest ones. Honesty doesn't always mean leaving a marriage. Sometimes it means fully committing emotionally where they are and releasing everything else. Sometimes it means admitting they cannot be the person you deserve. Sometimes it means stepping back completely. But avoiding truth is also a choice. And avoidance has consequences. The consequence for them is restlessness. The consequence for you is stagnation, if you stay. You may tell yourself, I understand them. You may say, it's complicated. You may believe, they're doing the best they can. And all of that may be true. But understanding someone else does not require sacrificing yourself. This is where your growth is being tested. Not in whether you can love deeply, you already can. Not in whether you can be patient, you already have been. But in whether you can recognize when love must include yourself. Because right now, the connection is asking something of you. It's asking you to stay emotionally available without being chosen. It's asking you to hold space for someone else's confusion. It's asking you to pause your own becoming. And your soul is starting to resist that. That resistance you feel lately? That quiet heaviness? That sense that something needs to change? That's not impatience. That's self-respect waking up. Your soulmate's heart may still be looking for you, but your life is not meant to revolve around being looked for. You are meant to be met. Met openly. Met fully. Met without secrecy, division, or delay. And here's the truth that reframes everything. The purpose of this connection was never to give you a future with someone who is unavailable. It was to awaken you to the depth you require in love. You now know what it feels like to be truly seen. You now know what emotional resonance feels like. You now know the difference between safety and aliveness. That knowledge is not a curse. It is preparation. Preparation for a love that does not arrive conflicted. Preparation for a partner whose heart and life are aligned. Preparation for a relationship where you don't have to be patient with absence. If you stay focused on someone who cannot choose you fully, you risk missing the person who will. And that is not fate. That is a decision. This is where the story quietly shifts away from them and back to you. You are allowed to step out of this dynamic without anger. You are allowed to honor what was real without staying. You are allowed to choose yourself without guilt. You are not abandoning the connection. You are completing its purpose. The connection did not come to trap you in longing. It came to refine your standards. It came to wake you up. And now, it is asking you to move. Not toward them. Toward your life. In the next part, we will talk about what happens when you stop being emotionally available to someone who cannot choose you, why the dynamic shifts immediately, and how this creates space for the kind of love that does not ask you to wait in silence. For now, let this truth settle deeply. You were never meant to be someone's unanswered question. You were meant to be someone's clear choice. And the moment you choose yourself, the entire story changes. Stay with me. Take a breath before you read further. This part is not meant to pull you into emotion for the sake of emotion. It's meant to ground you in truth so deeply that you stop questioning yourself afterward. This is the part where the fog lifts, not suddenly, not dramatically, but completely. Your soulmate is married. Their heart is still looking for you. And now you are standing at the most important crossroads of this entire story. This is where many people get lost, not because they don't understand the situation, but because they understand it too well and still hesitate to act in their own best interest. This is where compassion, empathy, and emotional intelligence can quietly turn into self-abandonment if you're not careful. So let's speak plainly. When someone is married and their heart is still searching, what they are really experiencing is emotional dissonance. Their outer life and inner truth are not aligned. And when alignment is missing, the psyche looks for relief. Sometimes that relief comes through distraction. Sometimes through work. Sometimes through numbness. And sometimes, through another soul who mirrors what's missing. That soul is you. Not because you invited this role. Not because you wanted it. But because your presence activated honesty. Here is what happens internally for your soulmate at this stage, and it's important you understand this clearly, without romance layered on top. They begin to live two emotional lives. One is visible, predictable, responsible. It's the life they show the world. The life they protect. The life that makes sense to others. The other is internal. Quiet. Private. Often unspoken. This is where their unmet emotional needs live. This is where they feel misunderstood, unseen, or muted. This is where you exist. They may not consciously think, "I'm in love with someone else." But they do think, something is missing. And your presence gave that something a shape. That's why the searching continues. But here is the truth most people don't want to hear, and the truth that will protect you. Someone can search forever without ever choosing change. Searching does not mean movement. Longing does not mean action. Awareness does not mean courage. Many people live their entire lives knowing something is missing and never do anything about it. Not because they're evil or cowardly, but because change threatens the structures they've built their identity around. Your soulmate may never leave their marriage. They may never speak the full truth out loud. They may never resolve the internal conflict cleanly. And still, they will continue searching emotionally. This is where the danger lies for you. Because if you stay emotionally available, even silently, even energetically, you become part of their coping mechanism. You become the place their heart visits so they don't have to face the emptiness directly. You become the relief valve. And relief valves prevent explosions, but they also prevent transformation. This is not your fault. But it is your responsibility to step out of that role. Because staying available does not help them grow. It only delays their reckoning. And it costs you something precious. It costs you presence in your own life. It costs you openness to someone who can meet you fully. It costs you momentum. You may not notice the cost immediately. It shows up subtly. You hesitate when new connections appear. You compare emotional depth unconsciously. You feel guilty imagining a future that doesn't include them. You stay partially anchored to a story that has no forward motion. This is how people get stuck for years without realizing it. Not because they're waiting openly, but because they're available quietly. And your soul is beginning to resist that. That resistance is not bitterness. It is wisdom. You are reaching the point where understanding them is no longer enough. Where compassion alone doesn't justify staying. Where love without alignment starts to feel heavy instead of meaningful. This is the point of maturation. This is where the connection stops asking you to empathize and starts asking you to choose yourself. And here's the part that may feel scary but is actually liberating. When you stop being emotionally available to someone who cannot choose you, the entire dynamic shifts immediately, even if nothing is said. They feel it. Not because you punished them. Not because you withdrew dramatically. But because the energetic door quietly closed. Suddenly, they no longer have access to the part of themselves that only came alive through you. And that forces them to confront the truth they've been avoiding. Some people respond to that by finally doing the inner work. Some respond by doubling down on distraction. Some feel loss for the first time. Whatever they do next is their path. But here is the miracle part, the part that's actually about you. The moment you step out of the role of emotional refuge, your life starts moving again. Not explosively. Not magically. But organically. Your nervous system relaxes. Your attention returns to the present. Your heart opens in a cleaner way. You stop living in anticipation. You start living in alignment. And alignment attracts clarity. You will notice that when you are no longer available for ambiguity, ambiguity stops showing up. When you are no longer willing to be half seen, fully present people begin to appear. When you stop romanticizing longing, you become available for mutuality. This connection did not come to ruin your life. It came to teach you what you will never accept again. You will never again stay where truth is hidden. You will never again be someone's emotional secret. You will never again confuse depth with delay. That knowledge changes everything. And here is the most important truth of all, the one that reframes the entire story. Your soulmate being married does not mean they were meant to be your life partner. Sometimes a soulmate comes to awaken you, not to stay. Sometimes a soulmate arrives to show you the depth you require, not to fulfill it themselves. Sometimes the lesson is not union. It is self-respect. You didn't lose anything here. You gained discernment. You gained emotional clarity. You gained the ability to choose alignment over longing. And that gain will shape every relationship that comes next. In the final part, we will talk about what happens after you fully choose yourself, why this connection fades without bitterness, and how love finally arrives without conflict once you stop waiting for someone who cannot meet you. For now, let this truth land deeply. You are not here to be searched for. You are here to be chosen, openly, freely, and without hesitation. And the moment you stop accepting anything less, your life begins to answer you back. Stay with me. This part is long because it has to be. This is not something your soul understands in a sentence or two. This is something that settles slowly, like truth always does. This is the part where the story no longer belongs to confusion, longing, or wondering what someone else will do. This is the part where it finally belongs to you. Up until now, the connection has felt heavy because it lived in contradiction. Love without permission. Recognition without choice. Depth without direction. And living inside that contradiction quietly trains the heart to tolerate things it was never meant to tolerate. You didn't notice it happening at first. No one ever does. It starts as empathy. then patience, then understanding. And before you realize it, you're holding space for someone else's inner conflict while your own life waits politely in the background. This is where the cost finally becomes visible. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But clearly. You begin to notice how often you've minimized yourself to make the situation feel manageable. How often you've said, "It's okay," when something didn't sit right. How often you've convinced yourself that love means enduring complexity instead of choosing peace. And once you see that pattern, you can't unsee it. This is not self-blame. This is awakening. You were never wrong for feeling what you felt. The connection was real. The resonance was real. The recognition was real. But reality also includes limits, and the limit here is simple and unchangeable. Someone whose life is already bound elsewhere cannot meet you fully, no matter how deep the feeling is. That truth hurts not because it's cruel, but because it's honest. And honesty is what finally frees you. At this stage, something important begins to shift inside you. The questions change. You stop asking, "Why does their heart still look for me?" And start asking, "Why am I still available to be looked for instead of chosen?" That question doesn't come from anger. It comes from clarity. Clarity is quiet, but it's relentless. You start to understand that longing is not proof of destiny. Sometimes longing is simply the echo of unmet needs. And if you stay too long inside someone else's echo, you begin to lose touch with your own voice. That's why this part matters so much. Because now, you're reclaiming your voice. You're realizing that being deeply understood by someone who cannot stand beside you openly is not a gift, it's an incomplete experience. And incomplete experiences, when prolonged, slowly erode joy. You may notice now that you don't want to talk about it as much. You don't want to analyze every detail. You don't want to replay conversations or interpret silence. That's not avoidance. That's completion beginning. Your heart is done negotiating. And here's something very important. Completion does not require closure from the other person. It requires clarity within yourself. Waiting for someone else to resolve their conflict before you resolve yours only keeps you tied to a timeline that isn't yours. This is where you step out of emotional limbo. Not by force. Not by bitterness. But by choosing alignment. Alignment means your values, your needs, and your actions finally match. It means you stop saying you want honesty while tolerating silence. It means you stop saying you want presence while accepting absence. It means you stop calling something deep when it consistently leaves you unsettled. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop sacrificing. And sacrifice, when it's one-sided and unacknowledged, is not love. It's self-abandonment dressed up as loyalty. You were loyal long enough. Now comes the part where life responds to your choice. When you truly step back. Not theatrically, not as a test, not as manipulation, but internally, the energetic dynamic changes immediately. You feel it first. A lightness. A quiet relief. A sense of returning to yourself. It's subtle, but it's unmistakable. Your attention starts returning to the present moment. Your body relaxes in ways it hasn't in a while. Your mind stops scanning for meaning in silence. This is your nervous system recognizing safety again. And something else happens too. the connection begins to lose its grip. Not because it wasn't real, but because it no longer serves the version of you that you are becoming. Unresolved bonds only hold power while we're still looking to them for answers. Once the answer becomes, "I choose myself," the bond softens naturally. You may still feel tenderness. You may still feel gratitude. You may still acknowledge the impact. But you won't feel pulled. That's the difference. This is also where guilt may try to sneak in. Guilt for leaving someone emotionally. Guilt for choosing yourself. Guilt for not waiting longer, understanding more, or loving harder. That guilt is a habit, not a truth. You are not responsible for someone else's unchosen life. You are responsible for your own. Choosing yourself does not harm someone who was never able to choose you. It simply removes you from a role you were never meant to play. And here is a truth that often comes as a quiet shock. When you fully step out of the dynamic, your soulmate finally feels the loss in a way they never did before. Not because you punished them. Not because you disappeared dramatically. But because the emotional availability they unconsciously relied on is gone. Some people only recognize what a connection meant once it stops buffering their discomfort. What they do with that realization is their responsibility. Some will finally confront their truth. Some will bury it deeper. Some will carry it quietly for the rest of their lives. But none of that is your burden anymore. Your life begins to open in a different way now. Not instantly, not magically, but authentically. You start noticing people who are present. Conversations that flow without tension. Connections that don't require you to translate silence or manage complexity. At first, this might feel unfamiliar. Your nervous system was used to intensity. Used to longing. Used to depth mixed with absence. Peace can feel strange at first when you're not used to it. But peace doesn't numb you. It grounds you. And grounded love feels different. It doesn't pull you out of yourself. It doesn't require waiting. It doesn't arrive conflicted. It shows up openly, without hesitation, without secrecy. This is what this connection was preparing you for. Not to settle for less. But to recognize more. You now know the difference between emotional resonance and emotional availability. You know the difference between recognition and readiness. You know the difference between loving someone and being able to build a life with them. That knowledge changes everything. You won't unlearn it. You won't compromise it. You won't ignore it. And because of that, the future will meet you differently. This part of the story doesn't end with fireworks or declarations. It ends with something far more powerful: self-trust. You trust yourself not to stay where you are half seen. You trust yourself not to romanticize pain. You trust yourself to choose alignment over longing. That trust is the real soulmate energy. Because once you live from that place, the kind of love that finds you next won't be divided. It won't be searching. It won't be hidden. It will arrive whole. And when it does, you won't have to wonder if someone's heart is looking for you. You'll know, because they'll be standing right in front of you, choosing you without hesitation. Stay with me. I know this is long. I know part of you wonders how many layers there can possibly be left. But this sixth part exists for one reason only: to close the emotional loop in a way that leaves you strong, clear, and no longer carrying weight that was never meant to be yours. This is not about them anymore. This is about the version of you that walks forward after everything has been understood. By now, something very quiet but very powerful has happened inside you. You are no longer emotionally leaning toward them. You are no longer checking your inner world to see if they are still there. You may still sense them sometimes. Memories don't vanish overnight, but the center has moved. You are back at the center of your own life. This is the moment most people never fully reach, because it requires letting go without bitterness, without blame, without needing the other person to finally get it. And you are here now. That matters. Your soulmate is married. Their heart looked for you. And now you understand something deeper than longing. Their search was never meant to become your waiting place. At this stage, you can finally see the entire arc of the connection clearly, not through emotion, not through pain, but through wisdom. You can see where it began, why it felt so intense, why it became complicated, and why it could not move forward without costing you something essential. And because you can see it clearly, it no longer controls you. This is where true emotional sovereignty begins. You are no longer trying to rescue meaning from the situation. You are no longer asking what it says about you. You already know. It says you are capable of depth. It says you are capable of emotional honesty. It says you are capable of resonance that awakens others. But it also says you are now capable of discernment. Discernment is not cynicism. Discernment is not fear. Discernment is clarity earned through experience. And clarity changes how you move. You may notice now that your body responds differently to thoughts of them. There is no spike of hope. No drop of despair. Just a gentle acknowledgement of something that once mattered and no longer asks for energy. That neutrality is not numbness. It is integration. Integration is when an experience becomes part of you without pulling you backward. This is also the point where you stop needing to explain the situation, to yourself or to anyone else. You don't need to justify why it was hard. You don't need to defend why you stayed as long as you did. You don't need to label it or frame it in a way that makes sense to others. It made sense to you when it needed to. And now, it no longer needs to. One of the most profound shifts that happens here is that you stop fearing similar connections in the future. You're no longer afraid that you'll attract unavailable people again or fall into complicated love again. That fear only exists when you haven't fully integrated the lesson. You have. You know now that you didn't attract someone unavailable because of a flaw. You attracted them because you were emotionally open, and openness without boundaries will always meet people who want depth without responsibility. Now, you have boundaries. Not walls. Not defenses. Boundaries rooted in self-respect. And boundaries change everything. You will feel it immediately when someone is emotionally divided. Your body will register it before your mind has to analyze it. You won't be pulled in. You won't try to understand it away. You won't romanticize it. You'll simply step back. That ease is new. And it's powerful. You also begin to understand something else that feels almost relieving. You do not need to be the one that got away to validate the connection. You don't need to be remembered forever. You don't need to be longed for. You don't need to live in someone else's internal conflict to prove you mattered. You mattered because you were real. And real experiences don't need dramatic endings to be complete. Your soulmate may carry this connection as a quiet knowing for the rest of their life. They may always remember the version of themselves they felt around you. They may occasionally wonder, what if? That is not your burden. That is the consequence of avoiding alignment. And consequences belong to the person who made the choice. You are free from that now. This is also where forgiveness completes itself, not forgiveness as absolution, but forgiveness as release. You are no longer holding them emotionally accountable for something they were never capable of giving. You see them clearly, compassionately, and without expectation. Seeing clearly does not require staying close. It requires letting go. And letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means no longer orienting your life around something that cannot meet you where you are. Now, something beautiful begins to happen. Your future stops feeling abstract. Not in a everything is figured out way, but in a grounded way. You trust yourself to recognize alignment when it arrives. You trust yourself to walk away when it doesn't. You trust yourself not to confuse intensity with intimacy again. That trust makes you calm. And calm is magnetic. From this place, love does not arrive as longing. It arrives as recognition without confusion. It arrives as presence without anxiety. It arrives as choice without delay. And when that kind of love enters your life, you will understand immediately why this connection could not stay. Not with regret, with gratitude. Gratitude that it showed you what depth feels like. Gratitude that it sharpened your discernment. Gratitude that it refused to become something half-lived. This connection did not fail. It completed its assignment. It brought you back to yourself. And that is the most important reunion of all. You are no longer someone waiting to be chosen. You are someone who chooses alignment. You are someone who understands that love must be lived, not hidden. And from this place, the next chapter of your life opens quietly, without chaos, without confusion, without divided hearts.
Hello everyone, ready for a love that stands beside you openly, ready for a partner whose heart and life move in the same direction, ready for peace that doesn't ask you to sacrifice depth. This is the end of the story, not because it stopped mattering, but because you finished becoming who it was meant to shape, and how your life moves forward. Not searching, not waiting, not longing, but available. Available for something whole. And that is where real love finally begins. Thanks for watching. If you love this video, please give your heart and also comment, subscribe to this channel. Thank you.